Good wishes to all of you. Our pass to fifth chapter Rulers and Buildings. See figure 1. The Qutub Minar is 5 stories high. The band of inscriptions you see are under its first balcony. The first floor was constructed by Qutbuddin Aybak and the rest by Iltutmish around 1229. Over the years, it was damaged by lightning and earthquakes and repaired by Alauddin Khilji, Muhammad Tughlaq, Firuz Shah, Tughlaq, and Ibrahim Lodi. Figure 1 shows the first balcony of the Qutub Minar. Qutbuddin Aibak had this constructed around 1199. Notice the pattern created under the balcony by the small arches and geometric designs. Can you see two bands of inscriptions under the balcony? These are in Arabic. Notice that the surface of the minar is carved and angular. Placing an inscription on such a surface required great precision. Only the most skilled craftsperson could perform this task. Remember that very few buildings were made of stone and brick 800 years ago. What would have been the impact of a building like the Qutub Minar on observers in the 13th century? Between the 8th and the 18th centuries, king and their officials built two kinds of structures. The first were forts, palaces, gardens, residences, and tombs, safe, protected, and grandest places of rest in this world. And next, the second were structures meant for public activity, including temples, mosques, tanks, wells, caravanserais, and bazaars. Kings were expected to care for their subjects and by making structures for their use and comfort. Rulers hoped to win their prize. Construction activity was also carried out by others, including merchants. They built temples, mosques, and wells. However, domestic architecture, large mansions, havels of merchants has survived only for the 18th century. Labor for the Agra Fort. Built by Akbar, the Agra Fort required 2000 stone cutters, 2000 cement and lime makers, and 8000 laborers. Ranijki Bori or the Queen Stepwell, located in Bundi in Rajasthan, is the largest among the fifth step wells that were built to meet the need for water. Known for its architectural beauty, the Bori was constructed in 1699 C by Rani Nathwat the queen of Raja Anirudh Singh of Bundi. Look at figure 2a. Screen in the Quat al Islam Mosque, Delhi, late 12th century. Figure 2b. Corbellate technique used in the construction of the screen. Okay. Engineering skills and constructions. Monuments provide an insight into the technologies used for construction. Take something like a roof for example. We can make this by placing wooden beams or a slab of stone across four walls. But the task becomes difficult if we want to make a large room with an elaborate superstructure. This requires more sophisticated skills. Between the 7th and 10th centuries, architects started adding more rooms. Doors and windows to buildings, roofs, doors, and windows were still made by placing a horizontal beam across two vertical columns. A style of architecture called tribute or corbellate between the 8th and 13th centuries. The tribute style was used in the construction of temples, mosques, tombs, and in buildings attached to large stepped wells. Baulis. Temple construction in the early 11th century. The Kandhariya Mahadeva temple dedicated to Shiva was constructed in 999 by the king Dangadeva of the Chandela dynasty. Figure 3b is the plan of the temple. An ornamented gateway led to an entrance and the main hall mandapam. Mahamandapa, where dances were performed. The image of the chief deity was kept in the main shrine Garbhagriha. This was the place for ritual worship where only the king, his immediate family, and priests gathered. The Khajuraho complex contained royal temples where commoners were not allowed entry. The temples were decorated with elaborately carved sculptures. What differences do you notice between the shikaras of the two temples? Can you make out that the shikara of the Rajeshwara temple is twice as high as that of the Kandarya Mahadeva? Look at figure 4. The Rajeshwara temple at Tanjavur had the tallest shikara amongst temples of its time. Constructing it was not easy because there were no cranes in those days and the 90-ton stone for the top of the shikara was too heavy to lift manually. So the architects built an inclined path to the top of the temple, placed and boulder on rollers and rolled it to the wall to the top. The path started more than 4 kilometers away so that it would not be too steep. This was dismantled after the temple was constructed, but the residents of the area remembered the experience of the construction of the temple for a long time. Even now, a village near the temple is called Charupalam, the village of the Incline. Two technological and stylistic developments are noticeable for the 12th century. The weight of the superstructure above the doors and windows was sometimes carried by arches. This architecture from forms was called arcuate. Look at figure 5a. The true arc, the keystone at the center of the arc transferred the weight of the superstructure to the base of the arc. Look at figure 5b. True arch, detailed from the Aliya Darwaza, early 14th century, Quwat al Islam Mosque, Delhi. Look at figure 6. A painting from the Akbarnama dated 1590 to 1595 showing the construction of the water gate at the Agra fort. Compare figures 2a and 2b with figures 5a and 5b. Limestone cement was increasingly used in constructions. This was very high quality cement, which when mixed with stone chips hardened into concentrate. This made constructions of large structures easier and faster. Take a look at the construction site in figure 6. Describe what the laborers are doing, the tools shown, and the means of carrying stones. Building temples, mosques, and tanks. Temples and mosques were beautifully constructed because they were places of worship. They were also meant to demonstrate the power, wealth, and devotion of the patron. Take the example of the Rajeshwara temple. An inscription mentions that it was built by King Deva for the worship of his god Rajeshwaram. Notice how the names of the ruler and the god are very similar. The king took the god's name because it was auspicious and he wanted to appear like a god. Through the rituals of worship in the temple, one god, Deva, honored another Rajeshwaram. The largest temples were all constructed by kings. The other lesser deities in the temple were gods and goddesses of the allies and subordinates of the ruler. The temple was a miniature model of the world ruled by the king and his allies. As they worshipped their deities together in the royal temples, it seemed as if they brought the just rule of the gods on earth. Muslim sultans and Padshahs did not claim to be incarnations of God, but Persian court chronicles described the sultan as the shadow of God. An inscription in the Quwat al-Islam mosque explained that God chose Alauddin as a king because he had the qualities of Moses and Solomon, the great lawgivers of the past. The greatest lawgiver and architect was God Himself. He created the world out of chaos and introduced order and symmetry. A royal architect. The Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan's chronicler declared that the ruler was the architect of the workshop of empire and religion. Figure 7. Plan of the Jami Masjid built by Shah Jahan in his new capital at Shah Jahanabad 1650 to 1656. As each new dynasty came to power, kings wanted to emphasize their moral right to be rulers. Constructing places of worship provided rulers with the chance to proclaim their close relationship with God, especially important in an age of rapid political change. Rulers also offered patronage to the learned and pious and tried to transform their capitals and cities into great cultural centers that brought fame to their rule and their realm. Importance of water. The Persian terms Abad, populated, prosperous, and Abadi, flourishing, are both derived from the word Ab, meaning water. It was widely believed that the rule of a just king would be an age of plenty when the heavens would not withhold rain, at the same time making precious water available by constructing tanks and reservoirs was highly praised. Sultan Iltutmish won universal respect for constructing a large reservoir just outside Delhi Aikwana. It was called the Hauzai Sultani or the King's Reservoir. Can you find it on map 1 in chapter 3? Rulers often constructed tanks and reservoirs, big and small, for use by ordinary people. Sometimes these tanks and reservoirs were part of a temple. Mosque. Note the small tank in the Jami Masjid in figure 7 or the Gurdwara, a place of worship and congregation for Sikhs, figure 8. Look at figure 8. Harmandir Sahib, golden temple with the holy Sarovar tank in Amritsar. Why were temples targeted? Because kings built temples to demonstrate their devotion to God and their power and wealth. It is not surprising that when they attacked one another's kingdoms, they often targeted these buildings. In the early 9th century, when the Pandya king Srimara Sri Vallabha invaded Sri Lanka and defeated the king, Sena won 831 to 851. The Buddhist monk and chronicler Dhammakirti noted he removed all the valuables. The statue of the Buddha made entirely of gold in the jewel palace, and the golden images in the various monasteries. All this he seized. The blow to the pride of the Sinhalese ruler had to be avenged, and the next Sinhalese ruler Sena too ordered his general to invade Madurai, the capital of the Pandyas. The Buddhist chronicler noted that the expeditions made a special effort to find and restore the gold statue of the Buddha. Similarly, in the early 11th century, when the Chola king Rajendra I built a Shiva temple in his capital, he filled it with prized statues seized from defeated rulers. An incomplete list included a sun pedestal from the Chalukyas, a Ganesha statue, and several statues of Durga, a Nandi statue from the eastern Chalukyas, an image of Bhairava, a form of Shiva and Bhairavi from the Kalingas of Orissa, and a Kali statue from the Palas of Bengal. Sultan Mohammed of Ghazni was a contemporary of Rajendra I. During his campaigns in the subcontinent, he attacked the temples of defeated kings and looted their wealth and idols. Sultan Muhammad was not a very important ruler at that time, but by destroying temples, especially the one at Somnath, he tried to win credit as a great hero of Islam. In the political culture of the Middle Ages, most rulers displayed their political might and military success by attacking and looting the places of worship of defeated rulers. Look at figure 9. Mughal Chahara Bags. A. The Chahara Bagh in Humayun's tomb, Delhi, 1562 to 1571. B. Terraced Chahara Bagh at Shalimar Gardens, Kashmir, 1620 and 1634. C. The Chahara Bagh adapted as a riverfront garden at Lal Mahal, Bari, 1637. In what ways do you think the policies of Rajendra I and Mohammed of Ghazni were a product of their times? How were the actions of the two rulers different? Gardens, tombs, and forts. Under the Mughals, architecture became more complex. Babur, Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, and especially Shah Jahan were personally interested in literature, art, and architecture. In his autobiography, Babur described his interest in planning and laying out formal gardens placed within rectangular walled enclosures and divided into four quarters by artificial channels. These gardens were called Chahara Bagh, four gardens because of their symmetrical divisions into quarters. Beginning with Akbar, some of the most beautiful Chahara Baghs were constructed by Jahangir and Shah Jahan in Kashmir, Agra, and Delhi. See figure 9. Okay, let's take a look at figure 10. A 1590 painting of Babur supervising workers laying out a Chahara Bagh in Kabul. Note how the interesting channels on the path created the characteristic Chahara Bagh design. Look at figure number 11. Tomb of Humayun, constructed between 1562 and 1571. Can you see the water channels? There were several important architectural innovations during Akbar's reign. For inspiration, Akbar's architects turned to the tombs of his Central Asian ancestor Taimur and central towering dome and the tall gateway Pishtag become, became important aspects of Mughal architecture. Look at figure 12. The throne balcony in the Diwani I am in Delhi, completed in 1648. First visible in Humayun's tomb, the tomb was placed in the center of a huge formal Chahara Bagh and built in the traditional known as Eight Paradises or Hasta Bishti. Hastabist, a central hall surrounded by 8 rooms. The building was constructed with red sandstone edged with white marble. It was during Shah Jahan's reign that the different elements of Mughal architecture were fused together in a grand harmonious synthesis. His reign witnessed a huge amount of construction activity, especially in Agra and Delhi. The ceremonial halls of public and private audience, Diwan Icons OM, were carefully planned. Placed within a large courtyard, these courts were also described as Chihil, Sultan, or 40 pillared halls. Shah Jahan's audience halls were specially constructed to resemble a mosque. The pedestal on which a throne was placed was frequently described as the Qibla, the direction faced by Muslims at prayer, since everybody faced that direction when court was in sessions. The idea of the king as a representative of God on earth was suggested by these architecture features. The connection between royal justice and the imperial court was emphasized by Shah Jahan in his newly constructed court in the Red Fort at Delhi. Behind the emperor's throne was a series of Petra Dura inlays that depicted the legendary Greek god Orpheus playing the lute. It was believed that Orpheus' music could calm ferocious beasts until they coexisted together peaceably. The construction of Shah Jahan's audience hall aimed to communicate that the king justice would treat the high and the low as equal, creating a world where all could live together in harmony. In the early years of his reign, Shah Jahan's capital was at Agra, a city where the nobility and constructed their homes on the banks of the river Yamuna. These were set in the midst of formal gardens constructed in the Chaharbagh format. The Chaharbagh garden also had a variation that historians described as the riverfront garden. In this, the dwelling was not located in the middle of the Chaharbagh but at its edge, closer, closer to the bank of the river. Shah Jahan adapted the riverfront garden in the layout of the Taj Mahal. The grandest architecture accomplishment of his reign. Here, the white marble mausoleum was placed on a terrace by the edge of the river, and the garden was to its south. Shah Jahan developed these architecture forms as a means to control the across that nobles at the river. Paitra Dura, colored hard stone placed in depressions carved into marble or sandstone, creating beautiful ornate patterns. Look at figure 3. The Taj Mahal at Agra, completed in 1643. Look at figure 15, 1850 map of Shah Jahanabad, where is the empire's residence. The city appears to be very crowded, but did you notice the many large gardens as well? Can you find the main street and the Jami Masjid? Look at figure 14, a reconstruction from a map of the riverfront garden city of Agra. Note how the garden palaces of the noble are placed on both banks of the Yamuna. The Taj Mahal is on the left. Compare the layout of Agra with Shah Jahanabad in Delhi in figure 15. In the new city of Shah Jahanabad that he constructed in Delhi, the imperial palace commanded the riverfront. Only specially favored nobles, like his eldest son Darashuko, were given access to the river. All others had to construct their homes in the city away from the river Yamuna, region out under empire. As construction activity increased between the 8th and 18th centuries, there was also a considerable sharing of ideas across regions. The traditions of one region were adopted by another. In Vijayanagara, for example, the elephant stables of the rulers were strongly influenced by the style of architect found in the adjoining sultanates of Bijapur and Golconda. See chapter 6. Look at figure 16. Interior of temple of Govindeva in Vrindavan, 1590. The temple was constructed out of red sandstone. Notice the 2 out of 4 intersecting arches that made the high ceiling roof. The style of architecture is from northeast Iran, Khorasan, and was used in Fatehpur Sikri. The creation of large empires that brought different regions under their rule helped in the cross fertilization of artistic forms and architectural styles. Mughal rulers were particularly skilled in adapting regional architectural styles in the construction of their own buildings. In Bengal, for example, the local rulers had developed a roof that was designed to resemble a thatched hut. The Mughals liked this Bangla dome. See figure 11 and 12 in chapter 9. So much that they used in their architecture. The impact of other regions was also evident. In Akbar's capital at Fatehpur Sikri, many of the buildings show the influence of the architectural styles of Gujarat and Malwa. Even though the authority of the Mughal rulers waned in the 18th century, the architectural styles developed under their patronage were constantly used and adopted by other rulers whenever they tried to establish their own kingdoms. Look at figure 17. Decorated pillars and struts holding the extension of the roof in Jodhabai Palace in Fatehpur Sikri. These follow architectural traditions of the Gujarat region. Churches that torch the skies. From the 12th century onwards, attempts began in France to build churches that were taller and lighter than earlier buildings. This architecture style, known as Gothic, was distinguished by high pointed arches, the use of stained glass, often painted with scenes drawn from the Bible, and flying buttresses. Tall spires and bell towers, which were visible from a distance, were added to the church. One of the best known examples of this architecture style is the Church of Notre Dame in Paris, which was constructed through several decades in the 12th and 13th centuries. Look at the illustration and try and identify the bell towers. Imagine you are an artisan standing on a tiny wooden platform held together by bamboo and rope 50 meters above the ground. You have to place an inscription under the first balcony of the Qutub Minar. How would you do this? Keywords. Go through the chapter and make your own list of 6 keywords. For each of these, write a sentence indicating why you choose the word. Let's recall. Question number 1. How is the Trebuchet principle of architecture different from the arcuate? Question number 2. What is a shikara? Question number 3. What is Petra Dura? Question number 4. What are the elements of a Mughal Chahara Bagh garden? Let's understand. Question number 5. How did a temple communicate the importance of a king? Question number 6. An inscription in Shah Jahan's Diwani-i Khas in Delhi stated, if there is paradise on earth, it is here. It is here. It is here. How was the image created? Question number 7. How did the Mughal court suggest that everyone, the rich and the poor, the powerful and the weak, received justice equally from the emperor? Question number 8. What role did the Yamuna play in the layout of the new Mughal city at Shahjahanabad? Let's discuss. Question number 9. The rich and powerful construct large house today. In what ways were the constructions of kings and their courtiers different in the past? Question number 10. Look at figure 4. How could that building be constructed faster today? Let's do. Question number 11. Find out whether there is a statue of a memorial to a great person in your village or town. Why was it placed there? What purpose does it serve? Question number 12. Visit and describe any park or garden in your neighborhood. In what ways is it similar to or different from the gardens of the Mughals? Thank you.